Meeting on Afghanistan. President Joe Biden discusses the future of the country with other world leaders. Congressional update. Speaker Nancy Pelosi goes before the media. Vatican lawsuit. Why the Holy See will not be held liable for a European abuse case. And reaching out to Catholics in Russia. Pope Francis offers encouragement. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, October 12th, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this feast of Blessed Carlo Acutis. I'm Tracy Sable. President Joe Biden did not allow cameras into his meeting on Afghanistan today. He spoke virtually with G20 leaders about the future of the war-torn country after the chaotic and deadly U.S. pullout. This, as the president is facing big problems on several fronts. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. Tonight, President Joe Biden's troubles keep piling up. Gas prices, inflation, the ongoing pandemic, the southern border, and last but not least, the future of Afghanistan.
Weeks after the last U.S. troops flew out of Afghanistan and the chaotic U.S. airlift of more than 100,000 people from Kabul, that war-torn nation now facing an urgent need of humanitarian aid to feed the hungry. With the economy on the verge of collapse and winter moving in, and as seen just last week, ISIS terrorists attacking worshipers at a mosque. The White House released a statement saying President Biden met virtually with G20 leaders today to discuss Afghanistan, including the critical need to maintain a laser focus on our enduring counterterrorism efforts, including against threats from ISIS-K. The White House says the world leaders are focused on helping more Afghans escape the country and to promote fundamental human rights for all Afghans, including women, girls, and members of minority groups. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden tweets today, Virginia, last year the people voted and democracy prevailed. We have to do it again and elect Terry McAuliffe as governor. Just today, Terry McAuliffe warned,
if Glenn Youngkin is elected governor, women's rights, reproductive rights will be taken away. Abortion will be gone here in Virginia.
Democrats are threatened because Glenn Youngkin, the Republican candidate for Virginia governor, is reportedly considering more pro-life legislation.
Also today, Vice President Kamala Harris addressed the National Congress of American Indians, saying Native Americans still struggle with poverty, health care, housing, and unemployment.
This persistent inequity, this persistent injustice is not right, and the pandemic has only made it worse.
Meanwhile, former U.S. Senator Joe Donnelly from Indiana, as you know, he's been nominated to be the next ambassador to the Holy See by President Biden. And today in the White House press briefing room, I asked Jen Psaki why they picked him, and she told me he has a long record in public service and that he'll represent the U.S. quite well. But pro-lifers are not convinced, saying he has a mixed record on abortion. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, the U.S. House of Representatives returns today to raise the debt ceiling until early December. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says that she will not compromise on the basic values of the budget reconciliation bill, which includes most of President Biden's economic agenda.
The timing would be reduced in many cases to make the cost lower, but it only would be in such a way that does not undermine the transformative nature of it, because some of it has to have enough money in order to have sustainability that can be counted on.
Speaker Pelosi added that she will not put the budget reconciliation bill on the House floor if it does not have a chance to pass the Senate. Denver's Cathedral Basilica of the Immaculate Conception has been vandalized by graffiti. Anti-Catholic messages were spray-painted in red outside of the cathedral building, on the sidewalks, and on the base of a statue of St. John Paul II, who visited that cathedral back in 1993. Catholic buildings in Colorado have suffered a recent rash of damage. After Attorney General Merrick Garland directed the FBI to investigate threats to teachers and school board members, many parents across the country believe they are now being unfairly targeted for speaking up and defending their right to be involved in their children's education. Joining us now is Ryan Bankert, Senior Counsel and VP for Legal Strategy at Alliance Defending Freedom. Ryan, welcome. Great to see you. First off, your thoughts on this directive from the Attorney General, and does it surprise you?
Well, Tracy, it's great to be here. And I think we have to say parents are not domestic terrorists. This is not a federal issue. Parents are rightly protesting the politicization of the classroom all across America. And to call out the federal dogs on parents is simply unacceptable and an abuse of federal power.
Yeah, and I understand Alliance Defending Freedom's General Counsel Kristen Wagoner sent a letter to the Attorney General in which she condemned any threats of violence or abusive behavior against school staff. But she said the order really goes too far, writing, quote, "It vilifies largely peaceful, well-intentioned citizens who are seeking nothing more than to protect and promote the well-being of their children. And it chills the constitutionally protected speech of those who rightly object to ill-considered policies implementing radical ideologies like critical theory and debatable COVID-19 mandates on our nation's school children." That said, what, if any, response have you all received from the Department of Justice?
Thus far, nothing. The Department of Justice has not responded to us at all. But you're absolutely right. No one condemns violence. No one condones violence. We condemn it. And in cases where parents have engaged in activities that could be interpreted as violent or it was threatening towards school board members, local law enforcement is there to handle that. That's what they're for. But this is not a federal issue. It is not a federal issue at all. What this is an effort by local school boards all across the country to inculcate, to inject politics into the classroom in the form of critical race theory. In the form of ideologies that are ultimately harmful to our kids. And parents not only have a right but a duty to stand up and oppose that politicization of the classroom.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of parents are concerned. What are you hearing from parents across the country? What are they saying to you? Have you heard anything?
Yes, we have, Tracy. Parents have been reaching out to us, not just from Loudoun County, which is a place where we've been very involved, but from states all across the United States. And the stories that we are hearing are really consistent everywhere. School boards that are forcing radical ideologies on students, whether that be critical race theory, or whether that be critical gender theory, or whether that be ideas that simply call Christianity or traditional religions oppressor religions. It's very, very frightening what's happening in our classrooms. And parents are right to be concerned, and they are right to be exercising their First Amendment freedoms to speak out against it. But yes, Tracy, we're hearing about this really from every corner of the country right now.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, what can parents do? Obviously very concerned about all of this. So what would be your advice to them?
Continue to speak out. Continue to go to your school board meetings. And that was the thing that got us most concerned about this letter from the Attorney General, is the potential chilling effect on parents who are peacefully and rightly protesting this politicization of the classroom. We don't want parents who are speaking peacefully and speaking truthfully to be deterred from doing just that, and they need to continue.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Ryan Bankert, Alliance Defending Freedom, Senior Counsel and VP for Legal Strategy. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Tracy.
Well, the head of France's Bishops' Conference says the right of confession needs reform to protect minors from predators. In a written statement after meeting with France's Interior Minister today, Archbishop Eric de Moulins-Beaufort says, quote, "Work is therefore necessary to reconcile the nature of confession and the need to protect children." He said changes are required after last week's documentation of widespread sexual abuse concealed over several decades. A European court rules the Vatican as a state cannot be sued for clergy abuse liability. Europe's Court of Human Rights affirmed Vatican sovereignty, saying the court pointed out that it had also accepted the granting of state immunity in civil proceedings. The ruling went against 24 abuse survivors who had pursued their lawsuit for a decade. Pope Francis sends an encouraging message to Catholics in Russia. The Holy Father's comments came on the 30th anniversary of the establishment of administrators for Catholics in Moscow and Siberia. Catholics are a very small religious minority in the former Soviet Union, as the country primarily is Russian Orthodox. EWTN News Rome correspondent Colin Flynn joins us now. Colin, great to see you. So tell us, what did the Pope have to say to mark this anniversary?
Good evening, Tracy. Well, to mark the 30th anniversary of the appointment of apostolic administrators to Moscow and Siberia after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Pope Francis has released the message of encouragement to Latin Rite Catholics in Russia to give witness to the gospel. In the message to the community, Pope Francis said he wished that this commemoration would stimulate the entire Catholic community in Russia to be, quote, an evangelical seed. He went on to express his closeness to the community there 3 decades after the Soviet Union fell, and said that he hoped the entire community would continue on a vocational path and that the people there would be a witness, which he said was not only good for your soul and for your faith, but also good for society as a whole. He said this anniversary was an opportunity to grow by following the gospel.
And Colin, can you give us some historical context of the importance of those apostolic administrator appointments 30 years ago?
Of course. Well, 3 decades ago, Tracy, when the Soviet Union had collapsed, Pope John Paul II appointed these apostolic administrators to Russia and Siberia to re-establish and start rebuilding the Catholic Church in what had been the USSR, because after 70 years of persecution and brutal oppression, there were effectively no visible signs of Catholicism left across most of what was then the region, the Soviet Union. It had been illegal to organize church gatherings, build church structures, and the penalties, if you were caught, were quite severe. People of faith lived in fear and had been completely cut off from practicing their faith in the community of the church. So at the time when Pope John Paul II made these appointments, the church rejoiced, especially in Russia, as it was a sign from the Pope, who of course was from Poland, who knew all too well about religious persecution, that the Universal Church had not forgotten the people of Russia and was ready to re-establish itself there straight away.
And Colin, before I let you go, can you kind of give us an idea of what the Catholic Church is like in Russia today?
Well, Tracy, 3 decades on, the Catholic Church is still very small in Russia, around 0.1% of the population. That's around 140,000 people out of a population of 144 million. The majority of the population is affiliated with the Russian Orthodox Church. In fact, the Pope signed this message as he was paid a visit by the Bishop of the Russian Orthodox Church, Metropolitan Hilarion Alfiev. He was participating in an interreligious gathering at the Vatican, and also together he and the Pope, they issued a joint appeal calling for net zero carbon emissions as soon as possible. Tracy?
Colin, thank you so much. Colin Flynn, EWTN Newsroom correspondent. Thank you again. Great to see you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Coming up, a closer look at the issues facing the U.S. economy and if there are signs things will improve. The International Monetary Fund downgraded its growth estimate for the U.S. economy. The announcement comes after disappointing jobs numbers, inflation, and supply chain disruptions as the U.S. and other countries try to recover from the full impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. Joining us now with analysis is Heritage Foundation Research Fellow Joel Griffith. Joel, always good to see you. Welcome back. As just mentioned, the IMF downgraded the growth estimate for the U.S. economy. So what exactly does that mean? And also, how significant is that?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. And what this underscores is that government policies matter. Over the past year and a half, as we've been recovering from this COVID pandemic, we have seen a wide disparity across this country. If you look at places like Utah and Florida and Georgia that have booming economies and contrast that to places like California and Hawaii and New York that still remain mired in a recession, well, that is because of those government policies. And I'm not surprised at all that the IMF has downgraded our economic outlook for the country, because we have a situation in which our political leaders are scaring people from going back to work. We're telling others that we're going to pay you to stay home, pay you more than you're earning on the job. And now we have a forced vaccination requirement coming down from the Biden administration. So I'm not surprised at all that these growth results have been downgraded. But thankfully, in our country, you have 50 states plus DC to choose from. And tell you what, a lot of folks are moving to places like Tennessee, Texas, and Florida, where you are free to be with your family and free to actually earn a living.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that for sure. You know, another thing the IMF also warned about was increased risk to global economic growth. What are you seeing, Joe? I know there's been a lot of talk, we mentioned this, about supply chain disruptions and in particular, how that's going to impact our holidays.
Oh, yes. These supply chain disruptions, we are all noticing this. I mean, if you just go to your local grocery store or your convenient mart or order products on Amazon Prime, you'll notice a lot of these items they're simply out of stock, or there's a week or 2 week long delay in receiving those items. And that is something that is not just a problem on our end here in this country, but also overseas, where you still have a lot of senseless COVID restrictions in place that are making it very difficult to ship items from point A to point B. And then you compound that with the fact that you have governments, especially the United States, that have been printing copious amounts of money, stimulating demand for goods with all this cash floating around, but at the same time, restrictions put in place to inhibit the supply. This is a big problem. And if you look at places like California, where you have sometimes close to 100 cargo ships stranded at a time off the coast, well, that's because you have the unions on shore that are refusing to open at nights or on weekends. And what I think you're going to see going forward, places like Florida that have a much more efficient port system, you're going to see states like that picking up a lot of that business. And hopefully that'll alleviate things by Christmas time.
Yeah, and something else that you can't help but notice are prices at the pump, right? They continue to rise. And now it seems that natural gas prices are going up too, just as temperatures are dropping. Let's talk more about that and how that could impact our household budgets.
Well, we have oil now at a multi-year high at over $80 a barrel. And what that means to most of us is when we go to fill up our cars and trucks, it's costing a lot more. You see gas prices are earning nearly $6 a gallon in California. This is really hurting families. And it's just bizarre to me that you have the Biden administration that is taking over this country after we finally achieved energy independence. And one of the first things they did was kill the Keystone XL pipeline that would have helped us have reliable natural gas supplies when fossil fuel supplies coming in from Canada. And then you've also seen the administration threaten to impose higher taxes and regulations on natural gas frackers and on oil drillers. So it's no surprise that even though prices are rising, companies are very hesitant to invest more money, drilling more and exploring more, because you have an administration that is overtly hostile towards energy development.
Joe, we have about 30 seconds left, but really quickly, what else are you keeping your eye on right now?
Well, I'm keeping my eye on right now on the proposed vaccine mandate that the Biden administration has proposed. This mandate would affect 80 million private sector employees. And not only is this really an assault on individual freedom to make our own medical decisions, this will also have big economic ramifications if it's not struck down in court. Because even if you have 5 or 10% of the workforce that refuse to go ahead and comply with this unlawful mandate, if that happens, you're going to see more people out of work, and you're going to see even more supply chain disruptions and slower economic growth going forward. It's very dangerous.
Well, Joel, unfortunately, we have to leave it right there. Always great to have you on. Thank you for your time. Joel Griffith, Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Up next, another example of cancel culture. How the American Principles Project became the latest victim. A group advocating on behalf of families says its YouTube channel, which has been out for 8 years, has been now permanently suspended. The American Principles Project says it was notified about the suspension yesterday, adding they were not given any warning nor any explanation. The group's Political Action Committee had just announced an ad campaign for the governor's race in Virginia. Last year, it spent $6 million educating voters on issues relating to families. And joining us now is John Schweppe, Director of Policy and Government Affairs for the American Principles Project. John, welcome back. Always great to see you. First off, what happened here? Have you heard anything else from YouTube or Google about why they took down your account?
Well, we have been in communication with them. We didn't hear anything for about 36 hours, but Google has told us our account is now back up temporarily, but they removed a number of videos. We're still trying to get the exact reason as to why from them. But you mentioned this at the outset, and I do think it's really suspicious. Terry McAuliffe's campaign here in Virginia sent out a fundraising email on Friday announcing that APP was getting involved in the race and castigating us and calling us a shadowy group. And just 3 days later, Google suddenly has suspended our YouTube account, removed some videos. So it's very suspicious timing. But we're looking at this. We want to get to the bottom of it, get to the truth here, and then let everyone know.
Yeah, you hear these stories about people and organizations being censored on social media, but when it happens to you, it really is a different story. For those who aren't familiar, can you tell us a little bit more about your group, APP, in particular where your organization stands on transgender issues, and do you think that may have played a role in your account being removed?
Oh, yeah. I think, we are not really aligned with Google on a lot of these social issues. We advocate for women's sports to remain for women. We advocate for no teaching of critical race theory in public schools. We've been out there talking about big tech censorship and the dangers of concentrated power of companies like Google. So, we definitely have a target on our backs, and I think that it's not necessarily surprising that they decided to go after us. But the real danger here is, where does it go from here? We're a pretty reputable conservative group here in Washington. But now, if a member of Congress wants to, post a video and it goes outside orthodoxy, are they going to have their videos removed as well? Is YouTube, going to just interfere in our elections as freely as they want with no repercussions? And so that's our concern here. Our YouTube channel, it is what it is. But we really want to make sure that this isn't happening to more people, and we want to protect democracy.
Yeah, John, I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts on that, and what it signals when it comes to free speech here in the United States when you have your side and others being taken down for, just expressing yourself, essentially?
Well, Tracy, Google, YouTube, Facebook, this is the digital public square. This is where people go to get information. They type things into the search bar. They expect to get honest results. And when you have these powerful companies putting their thumb on the dial and deciding what we're able to think in response to some of these keywords, that's really dangerous. And so, I think we've seen that with Google for a long time. They have tremendous power over the American people and affecting how they view these issues. And that's why we have to really look at are Republicans in Washington going to do something about this, whether it be Section 230 reform, whether it be antitrust to break these companies up. We have to look at all of the options.
Well, John, thanks so much for coming on. Please keep us posted. We appreciate your time today. John Schweppe, Director of Policy and Government Affairs for the American Principles Project. Thanks again, John.
Thank you.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.